Hey there, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the foundational blueprint of the United States. If you're a grade 7 learner diving into your Forming a New Nation guided notes, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to look closely at how this new nation was actually formed. And we're not just looking at what happened, but analyzing how we know it happened, using primary sources, digging into facts, and untangling historical interpretations. Let's just jump right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. We'll be breaking this massive blueprint down into 4 parts. First, colonization and early conflicts. Second, revolution and defining rights. Third, forging an American identity. And finally, connecting the historical eras. All right, starting right off with Section 1, colonization and early conflicts. Let's look at Unit 1. To really grasp this era, we have to start with an essential question. Did colonization create new opportunities or deep conflicts? You see, history isn't just a list of dates to memorize. It's really a giant collection of perspectives. To answer this question, we have to look closely at who is writing our sources and who their audience was. It's absolutely crucial to separate the hard facts from the author's own interpretation.
Now, placing all of this in time and location is absolutely vital. We begin with prehistoric North America, way before European arrival. Then, moving into the early colonial era, well, motivations get pretty complex. They're driven by this mix of Enlightenment rationality and intense religious piety. But right alongside this, we see the establishment of transatlantic slavery. Understanding this timeline means we really have to sort the raw historical facts of arrival from the varying interpretations of why different groups came here.
When we analyze colonial development, a massive challenge is distinguishing historical fact from popular myth. And this is exactly where we start building our claim, evidence, and reasoning skills. We can't just accept a textbook summary at face value, right? We have to cross-reference it with actual primary sources to prove how these early systems, including the system of slavery, were actually built.
Moving right along to Section 2, Revolution and Defining Rights, let's check out Unit 02.
So why do people rebel, and how do societies define rights after a revolution? I mean, think about that for a second. It's one thing to get fired up and angry about taxation, but it's an entirely different challenge to analyze the civic significance of sitting down and writing the rules for a brand new society.
That messy transition from rebellion to governance basically gave us the bedrock of the country: the American Revolution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution. Now, when you actually compare a primary source, like the Declaration, to a modern textbook summary, you quickly realize the Constitution wasn't some magical fix. Actually, scratch that. It was more like a deeply contested, heavily debated set of rules meant to somehow hold a very fragile new nation together.
Evaluating the compromises in these founding documents is just fascinating, especially when you start comparing two completely different perspectives. The delegates had totally opposing, often heavily biased views on massive issues like slavery and representation. By analyzing those biases and the limitations in the primary sources, we can actually build a direct cause and effect chain, showing exactly how these compromises impacted the nation's future.
And that brings us to Section 3, Forging an American Identity. Let's dig into Unit 03.
So, how did the United States define itself while both expanding and dividing? It is honestly an incredible paradox. You have this country physically growing at an astonishing rate, yet somehow fracturing internally at the exact same time. It's literal growth and deep division existing right side by side.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that we immediately see two deeply conflicting perspectives emerge. You've got the Federalists, who favored a strong central government, squaring off against the Republicans, who championed states' rights and agriculture. These were just political parties. They were fundamentally different visions for what the entire American identity should be.
One vision pushed hard for nationalism, which is a strong sense of national pride, unity, and identity. Think of nationalism as the glue. It was the force trying to hold this rapidly expanding country together in a single, unified American project. But pulling in the exact opposite direction was sectionalism. That's an intense loyalty to the interests of one's own specific region over the nation as a whole. So if nationalism was the glue, sectionalism was the wedge. The North, the South, and the West were all developing very distinct economies, causing this massive nation-stretching push and pull effect.
Then throw the era of manifest destiny and rapid social reform into that mix, and wow, the rate of change is just staggering. People weren't just expanding borders out west, they were completely rethinking society, education, women's rights, and the institution of slavery. The physical map of the country and the cultural map were literally transforming at the same time.
Synthesizing all of this, comparing the political parties, explaining nationalism versus sectionalism, and analyzing reform movements, well, that's the ultimate challenge. It requires taking all these primary sources, deeply analyzing their biases and limitations, and writing a fully contextualized DBQ-style paragraph about how this really messy American identity was truly forged.
Finally, we arrive at Section 4, Connecting the Historical Eras. Because the best way to really retain all this history is to build it into one cohesive narrative. And this brilliantly illustrates our chain of cause and effect. Look at Step 1. Colonization creates complex opportunities and conflicts. Step 2. Those early conflicts boil over into rebellion, resulting in some very fragile constitutional compromises. And finally, Step 3. Those very same compromises fuel rapid westward expansion, which just deepens sectional divisions. It's all connected. Every single era directly triggers the next.
So I want to leave you with this one provocative question. How do these early eras of colonization, revolution, and identity continue to shape the U.S. today? The debates between federal and state power, the tension of regional interests, none of this just stayed in the past. The blueprint we just examined, it's the very foundation the country operates on right now. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history around you.